Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're in our uh, conversation about the Gospel of Matthew. We're in chapter 24, Jesus' final sermon. We're working through the text of that eschatological sermon. We're in chapter 24, and we're going to be reading verses 29 through 35. These verses bring to an end the first answer that he gives about the sign of the destruction of the temple. And it also is an answer to the question, the sign of your coming, because Jesus is going to make clear in these verses the destruction of Old Testament Judaism, in a sense, represents a time of his coming, a time of his arrival. Um, God destroyed once and for all Mosaic Judaism, Old Testament Judaism in AD 70, this event that Jesus is talking about. And so, in a very real sense, it represents his coming. Not his second coming, his final coming, but his arrival and to bring about judgment, to bring about the end of an age, and to bring it about clearly and for all time. And he's going to, in our passage today, he's going to use apocalyptic language because apocalyptic language is needed. This is, as he pointed out yesterday, and he will point out again today, bigger than Egyptian bondage, bigger than Babylonian captivity, bigger than Assyrian captivity, bigger than the return. It's bigger than all of that because it represents the absolute end, the destruction at God's own hand of his Mosaic covenant with the iron fist of the Roman Empire. And so it deserves, it demands apocalyptic imagery. And he's going to reach back into Isaiah, into Daniel, into Ezekiel, into Zephaniah, into Zechariah. And he's going to pull phrases from those prophets, particularly passages, and phrases about this very event, God's ending Mosaic Judaism in favor of the coming of the Messiah and the beginning of the Messianic age. The Messianic age, of course, begins with Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection and ascension into heaven. But 40 or so years later, God is going to destroy Old Testament Judaism, and this represents a coming of Jesus to accomplish all that will initiate the Messianic age. And let's not think that 40 years is a long time, because we are 2,200 years, 2,000 years, 2,100 years on the other side of it. So anyway, let's read verses 29 through 35. 35 is a transitional verse taking us to the next topic, the actual end of time. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender, and it puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. Even so, you too, when you see all these things, recognize that he is near, right at the door. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words shall not pass away. I understand how some people read these apocalyptic phrases and think end of time, but as we pointed out a few sessions ago, apocalyptic language does not always, even does not a majority of the time, refer to the actual end of time. It's the end of an age, the end of an era. And this is the biggest until that final end when Jesus comes again in heaven. The universe and our planet are destroyed. Next to that event, this is the biggest event of them all, because this is the time when God is going to destroy Judaism, Mosaic Judaism. his own covenant that he made with the children of Israel through the Ten Commandments that was initiated at Sinai. He himself is going to destroy it all in AD 70 when the Romans destroy the temple. And therefore that event demands apocalyptic imagery, if anything does, and he's going to oblige. And so he uses that apocalyptic imagery to let them know this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the actual end of Mosaic Judaism. And he talks about the fig tree and how you can notice the cycle of life in a fig tree. And you know, when the time is right to ask for figs, that's got to be vivid in their mind because of what had just happened earlier in the week when he cursed a fig tree when it was not ready to bear figs. And now that's really resonating with them. And then he says, verse 34, this generation will not pass away. Some of you will still be alive when these events I'm describing will take place. None of these men are alive today. This cannot be about the actual second coming of Christ when the universe is to be destroyed. It's about the second most cataclysmic event in human history, which is the destruction of Mosaic Judaism that he's describing. And gathering his people together, they did separate out, and they almost all of them gathered together at Pella. And even if he's just being metaphorical, we get the point. We get the point. Did the actual stars fall out of the sky? No. He's using apocalyptic literature to describe a cataclysmic event. And therefore, if there are no four ends of the earth is a sphere. He's using poetic language to describe what generally is about to happen. And we need to understand that. And then in verse 35, he says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words shall not pass away. So this is the transition. You're going to think this is the end of the world, but it's not. It's not the end of the world. There's still a lot of evangelism left to do. And my word is eternal. If you want to know what the end of time is going to be like, well, I'm about to tell you, he says. And he will when he picks up with verse 36. And we'll talk about that next time and finish this chapter. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.